The morning sun peeked through the frost-covered windows of 42 Maple Street, where the Park family had lived for the past 15 years. Dr. Jin Park sat at his kitchen table, sipping hot coffee and looking through his old family photos. The steam from his cup made little clouds in the cold morning air, reminding him of winter mornings back in South Korea. Jin remembered the day he and his wife, Dr. Yuna Park, had first seen this house. They had just moved to America, carrying big dreams and 2 heavy suitcases filled with books about quantum physics and aerospace engineering. The house wasn't perfect. The paint was peeling, and the garden looked wild. But they saw something special in it. Now, 15 years later, it was the most eye-catching house on the street, especially during Christmas time. "Dad, Dad, look what I found in the attic." Maya's excited voice broke through Jin's thoughts. His 12-year-old daughter ran down the stairs, her curly hair bouncing with each step. She held an old dusty box marked Christmas 2020 in her mother's neat handwriting. Jin smiled at Maya. She and her brother Marcus had been their greatest gifts, coming into their lives 13 years ago through adoption. Maya had been just a baby then, and Marcus was barely 2. Now they were growing up so fast, Maya with her love for science and Marcus with his artistic talent. "What's in the box, sweetie?" Jin asked, putting down his coffee cup. Maya placed the box on the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside were old Christmas lights, the kind Jin had used when they first started their famous Christmas displays. "These are your first quantum lights, aren't they, Dad?" she asked, her brown eyes sparkling with curiosity. "That's right," Jin nodded, picking up one of the light strings. "Back then, everyone thought I was crazy for trying to use quantum programming in Christmas lights. They said it was too complicated for holiday decorations." The sound of footsteps came from the stairs again, and Marcus appeared, still in his pajamas despite it being almost 9 o'clock. At 14, he was already taller than his mother, and almost as tall as Jin. "Are we talking about the Christmas display?" he asked, heading straight for the refrigerator. "Because I had some ideas about that." Yuna walked in from the garage, where she had been working on their latest Christmas project. She wore her old work overalls, covered in paint and glitter. "Good morning, everyone," she said, giving each family member a quick hug. "Jin, did you check the weather forecast for next week? We need to make sure the new holographic projectors can handle the temperature." Jin pulled out his tablet and opened the weather app. "It's going to be cold, but not as cold as last year. Remember when our first hologram froze and Santa looked like he was doing the robot dance?" The whole family laughed at the memory. Their Christmas displays had come a long way since then. What started as simple lights and decorations had grown into something magical. Jin's work in quantum physics helped him create light displays that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Yuna's aerospace engineering skills meant their decorations could float and move in ways that amazed everyone who saw them. "The contest judges are coming in 2 weeks," Yuna reminded them, sitting down with her own cup of coffee. "The Hansons next door are already putting up their display." The Hanson family had won the county Christmas decoration contest 3 years in a row. Their display was always perfect, with traditional scenes of Santa, reindeer, and snowmen. It was beautiful, but it was the same every year. The Parks wanted to do something different. "I saw Mr. Hanson watching our house yesterday," Marcus said, joining them at the table with a bowl of cereal. "He looked worried when Dad was testing the new quantum light sequence." Jin nodded. The Hansons had been their neighbors since the Parks moved in, but they had never become friends. They were polite enough, but something always felt off about their politeness. When the Parks first moved in, Mrs. Hanson had suggested they might be more comfortable in a different neighborhood. When they adopted Marcus and Maya, the Hansons stopped inviting them to neighborhood barbecues. "This year's display will be special," Yuna said, pulling out her blueprints. She spread them across the table, careful not to spill any coffee on them. The drawings showed their house transformed into a magical Christmas wonderland. We're combining everything we've learned over the years. Jin pointed to different parts of the blueprint. The quantum lights will create three-dimensional patterns in the air. The holographic projectors will make it look like snow is falling upward. And here, he pointed to the roof, we'll have flying reindeer that actually look like they're breathing. Maya leaned in closer to study the plans. Can we add something from your hometown, Mom? Like those pretty lanterns you showed us in the photos. Yuna's face lit up. That's a wonderful idea. We could use hanji paper to make traditional Korean lanterns. The quantum lights would look beautiful shining through them. And I could paint them, Marcus added excitedly. I've been practicing those traditional patterns you taught me. The family spent the next hour planning and dreaming. They talked about how to combine Korean and American Christmas traditions, how to make the quantum lights work with the paper lanterns, and how to create something no one had ever seen before. Later that morning, they all went outside to start working. The air was cold and crisp, perfect for putting up Christmas decorations. Their neighbors were out too, and soon the street was busy with the sound of ladders being moved and holiday music playing. Jin climbed onto the roof to check the spots where they would install the holographic projectors. Yuna worked on the support structures that would hold their floating decorations. Marcus and Maya sorted through boxes of lights and decorations, testing each string to make sure it worked. Hey, Dr. Park, called Mr. Hanson from his yard. That's quite a setup you're planning this year. Jin waved politely. Just trying something new, Bob. Good luck in the contest. Mr. Hanson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Same to you. Though I should warn you, the judges usually prefer traditional displays. All this modern technology might be too different for them. We like different, Maya said proudly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Different is what makes things interesting. More neighbors came out to watch as the parks worked. Some offered to help, genuinely excited to see what the family would create this year. Others stood back and whispered to each other, shaking their heads at the unusual decorations. By lunchtime, they had made good progress. The basic structure was up, and Jin had started programming the quantum light sequences. He sat at a folding table in the driveway, typing code into his laptop while Maya watched over his shoulder. How does it work, Dad? She asked, pointing to the lines of code on the screen. Jin explained in simple terms. Regular Christmas lights can only turn on and off, but these quantum lights can exist in multiple states at once. It's like they're awake and asleep at the same time. This lets us create patterns that seem impossible. Like magic, Maya grinned. Like science that looks like magic, Jin corrected with a smile. The best kind of magic there is. Inside the garage, Yuma and Marcus worked on the first batch of paper lanterns. Yuna showed Marcus how to fold the hanji paper just right, making sure it was strong enough to hold the tiny quantum lights they would put inside. Your grandmother taught me how to make these, Yuna told Marcus as they worked. She would have loved to see what we're doing with them. Marcus carefully painted Korean patterns on one of the lanterns. Do you think we can win the contest with something so different? The judges might not understand it. Yuna paused her work and looked at her son. Understanding comes from seeing something new and being willing to learn about it. If people don't understand our display at first, maybe it will make them curious enough to learn more. As the afternoon went on, more of their plan came together. The quantum lights began to pulse with impossible colors. The first holographic projector created a test image, a simple snowflake that spun slowly in the air, looking as real as if you could reach out and touch it. Some of the neighborhood children gathered to watch, their eyes wide with wonder. Even a few adults stopped to stare at the floating snowflake, trying to figure out how it worked. This is just the beginning, Jin told them. Wait until you see the whole display. That evening, as the sun set, the Park family stood in their driveway, looking at what they had accomplished so far. The basic framework was in place, ready for the more complicated elements they would add over the next few days. We should take a picture, Yuna suggested, for next year's memory box. They grouped together, with Maya and Marcus in front of their parents. Jin set up his phone camera with a timer, and they all smiled as it took the photo. In the background, their partially completed display glowed with the promise of something extraordinary. "Tomorrow we'll start on the big stuff," Jin said as they headed inside for dinner. "The quantum matrix for the main light show, the hover mechanisms for the floating decorations, and more lanterns," Marcus added. "I want to make one that tells the story of how you and Mom met." Maya yawned but couldn't stop smiling. This is going to be the best Christmas display ever. As they ate dinner together, they talked more about their plans. They didn't know that their beautiful dream would soon face a challenge. They didn't know that someone was already planning to stop them from winning the contest. They just knew they were creating something special together, something that would show everyone the magic that happens when different traditions, technologies, and cultures come together. The Parks went to bed that night with their heads full of quantum lights and floating lanterns, Korean patterns, and Christmas carols, science, and magic. Outside their window, the single holographic snowflake continued to spin, casting a soft, impossible light into the darkness, like a promise of wonderful things to come. 3 days before the contest judging, everything changed. The morning started like any other December day, with frost on the windows and the smell of coffee in the Park family kitchen. Maya was the first to notice something was wrong. She had gotten up early to watch the sunrise through their Christmas display. Every morning, the quantum lights created special patterns when the first sunlight hit them. But today, the lights weren't making any patterns at all. Instead of the beautiful dance of colors they usually saw, the lights just blinked randomly. "Dad," Maya called, running back into the house. "Something's wrong with the lights." Jin was already awake, sitting at his computer and frowning at the screen. "I know, sweetie. I've been trying to fix it for the past hour." He typed quickly on his keyboard, but nothing seemed to work. "Someone changed the quantum programming codes last night." Yuna came downstairs, still wearing her pajamas. "Changed the codes? How is that possible?" "Someone hacked into our control system," Jin explained, his voice serious. "They knew exactly what they were doing. All our special light patterns are gone. Even my backup files are corrupted." Marcus joined them, looking worried. "Can't you just write new codes, Dad?" Jin shook his head slowly. "It took me months to create those light patterns. Each one needed thousands of calculations to make the quantum effects work right. We only have 3 days until the judging." The family stood quietly for a moment, letting the bad news sink in. Then Maya spoke up. "We should check the rest of the display. Maybe the lights are the only thing they messed up." They all went outside together. The morning air was very cold, and their breath made little clouds as they walked around their yard. Soon, they found more problems. The holographic projectors that created the floating images were missing. Someone had taken them during the night. "Look at this," Yuna said, pointing to the ground. There were footprints in the frost, leading from their yard to the Hansons' house next door. The prints disappeared under the hedge that separated the two properties. "We should call the police," Marcus suggested. Jin nodded. "I'll call them right after breakfast. But first, let's check everything else." They found more damage as they looked around. The paper lanterns Marcus and Yuma had made were torn. The support structures for their floating decorations were bent. Someone had worked hard to ruin everything they had built. While they were looking at the damage, Mrs. Hanson came outside to get her newspaper. She saw the Parks standing in their yard and walked over to the hedge. "Oh my goodness," she said, putting her hand over her mouth. "What happened to your lovely display?" "Someone damaged it during the night," Yuma answered politely. She pointed to the footprints. They left tracks in the frost. Mrs. Hanson looked at the footprints, then quickly looked away. "How terrible. But you know, there's still time to put up a nice, simple display. Something more traditional. The judges like traditional displays better anyway." Before anyone could answer her, Mr. Hanson came outside. He was carrying something in his hands, pieces of broken metal and glass that looked very familiar to Jin. "Bob," Jin called out. "Those look like parts from our holographic projectors." Mr. Hanson jumped a little, almost dropping the pieces. "Oh, yes, I found these in our trash can this morning. I was just coming to ask if they were yours." Maya stepped forward. "Why would our broken projectors be in your trash can?" Mr. Hanson's face turned red. "Well, that is." He looked at his wife for help. Mrs. Hanson spoke quickly. "Someone must have put them there to cause trouble, to make us look bad. You don't think we had anything to do with this, do you?" More neighbors were coming outside now, attracted by the conversation. They gathered in small groups, watching and whispering. Some looked angry about what had happened to the park's display. Others seemed happy about it. The police arrived a little later. Officer Kim wrote down everything the parks told her about the damage. She looked at the footprints and took pictures of the broken projectors. She asked Mr. and Mrs. Hanson many questions, but they kept saying they didn't know anything about what happened. "We'll investigate," Officer Kim promised, "but without clear proof, there's not much we can do right now." After the police left, the Parks went back inside their house. They sat around the kitchen table, drinking hot chocolate and trying to think of what to do next. "Maybe we should give up," Marcus said quietly. "We can't fix everything in 3 days." "No," Maya said firmly. "We can't let them win like this. There has to be a way." Jin looked at his family. He saw how sad Marcus was, how angry Maya was, and how disappointed Yuna was. Then he remembered something his grandmother used to say. "When someone tries to break your spirit, show them how strong it really is." "Maya's right," he said. "We're not giving up. We're going to make an even better display." Yuna smiled for the first time that morning. "But how? We lost so much." "We lost the complicated things," Jin said. "The quantum lights, the holograms, the floating decorations. But maybe we don't need all that technology. Maybe we need something simpler but more meaningful." The local news station sent a reporter to cover the story. Ms. Lee interviewed the Parks in their front yard, standing next to their damaged display. "This was going to be something special," Jin told her. "We wanted to show how beautiful it is when different traditions come together. When science and art work together. When cultures blend together to create something new." The reporter looked at the broken decorations. "Will you still enter the contest?" "Yes," Yuna answered. "We're not sure how yet, but we'll find a way." Throughout the day, people from all over town came to see what had happened. Many brought supplies to help. Paper for new lanterns, lights to replace the broken ones, hot food to keep the family's spirits up. Mrs. Chen from the Korean market brought boxes of hanji paper. "My grandmother taught me how to make lanterns too," she told Yuna. "Let me help you make new ones." Mr. Washington from the Science Museum offered to help Jin create new light patterns. "They won't be quantum lights," he said, "but we can still make them beautiful." By sunset, their yard was full of people wanting to help. Children collected broken pieces and sorted supplies. Adults helped repair damaged decorations. Teenagers set up lights and hanged ornaments. The Hansons watched all this from their window. Their perfect Christmas display seemed cold and lonely compared to the warmth and activity in the park's yard. That night, after everyone had gone home, the Park family sat in their living room. They were tired from working all day, but they felt better than they had that morning. "Look what I found," Maya said, holding up an old photo album. She opened it to show pictures of their first Christmas in the house. Their decorations back then were very simple, just some regular lights and a few ornaments. "We didn't have quantum lights or holograms then," Jin said, "but people still loved our display. Because it came from our hearts," Yuna added. "That's what made it special." Marcus picked up one of the new lanterns they had made that day. "Maybe that's what we need to focus on now. Not the fancy technology, but the heart." They stayed up late that night, making new plans. They couldn't replace the quantum lights or the holograms, but they could create something different, something that would show everyone that their spirit couldn't be broken. As they worked, more snow began to fall outside. It covered the footprints that had led to the Hansons' house, But it couldn't cover up the truth. Someone had tried to stop them from sharing their special Christmas display with the world. But instead of breaking their spirit, the attack had made them stronger. The Parks went to bed that night, knowing they had a lot of work ahead of them. They only had 2 days left until the contest judging. But now they had a new plan, and they had something even more important. They had their family, their friends, and their community standing behind them. Outside, the snow kept falling, making everything look clean and new. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities. The Park family was ready for both. The next morning, Jin woke up very early. He sat in the kitchen with his coffee, watching the sunrise through the window. The broken Christmas display in their yard looked sad in the morning light, but as he watched the sunrise, he noticed something interesting about how the light moved through the torn paper lanterns. It gave him an idea. "Yuna," he called up the stairs. "Can you come down here? I need to show you something." Yuna came downstairs quickly, worried that something else had gone wrong. But when she saw Jin's excited face, she knew this was different. "Look at how the sunlight catches the torn edges of the lanterns," Jin said, pointing outside. "See how it creates patterns. What if we did that on purpose?" Yuna moved closer to the window. The morning light was shining through the damaged paper lanterns in beautiful ways. The torn edges made the light split into unexpected patterns. "It's like the quantum light effects," she said slowly, but completely natural. They heard footsteps on the stairs, and Maya and Marcus came down to join them. The children were still in their pajamas, but they were wide awake. "I had a dream last night," Maya said, sitting at the table. "I dreamed about Grandma's stories of the first Christmas lights in her village in Korea. How they used mirrors to make one candle look like many." Yuna's eyes lit up. "That's right. My mother told me those stories too. They didn't have electricity, so they used mirrors and paper to make the light dance." Marcus grabbed a piece of paper and started drawing. "What if we combine those old Korean ideas with what we know about light and reflection? We don't need quantum programming to make light do amazing things." For the next hour, the family worked on new plans. Jin drew diagrams showing how they could use simple mirrors and paper to create complex light patterns. Yuna calculated angles and distances. Marcus designed new patterns for the lanterns. Maya figured out how to make the light change colors using different kinds of paper. "We can use math and science," Jin explained, "but in a different way than before. Instead of quantum computers, we'll use the laws of physics that anyone can see and understand." They started work right after breakfast. News about their project had spread, and more people came to help. Mrs. Chen brought her whole family. They set up tables in the park's garage and taught everyone how to make traditional Korean lanterns. "Each fold has meaning," Mrs. Chen explained to the children who gathered to watch. "When you fold with care and good thoughts, the lantern carries those feelings in its light." Mr. Washington came back with mirrors and prisms from the Science Museum. He helped Jin set up a system of reflectors that would catch the sunlight during the day and the street lights at night. "This is actually better than the quantum lights," Mr. Washington said. "People can see how it works, but it still seems magical." Marcus had his own team of helpers. They sat at a long table, painting Korean patterns on the new lanterns. But Marcus added his own twist to the traditional designs. He painted Christmas trees that turned into Korean mountains. He made Santa's sleigh look like it was being pulled by Korean dragons instead of reindeer. "I'm mixing the stories together," he explained to anyone who asked. "Because that's what our family is, a mixture of different stories that make something new and beautiful." Maya worked with Yuna, figuring out where to place each lantern and mirror. They needed to think about how the light would move as the sun crossed the sky. They also had to plan for nighttime, when the streetlights and moon would create different effects. "It's like a giant puzzle," Maya said. "Every piece has to be in exactly the right place." By lunchtime, their yard was busy with activity. The smell of Korean food mixed with pizza as everyone shared what they had brought. Children ran back and forth carrying supplies. Adults climbed ladders to hang lanterns and adjust mirrors. Teenagers tested different colored papers to see which made the best light effects. Even Officer Kim came back to help. She brought more police officers with her. "We're still investigating what happened," she told Jin, "but we wanted to help make something good come from this." The Hansons stayed inside their house all day. Their Christmas display looked the same as always, perfect and unchanging. But no one seemed to notice it anymore. Everyone was too busy watching the park's new creation take shape. As the afternoon went on, they discovered more ways to make their display special. Someone brought wind chimes, and they found that the moving metal pieces created sparkling reflections. A group of children made paper snowflakes, and Marcus showed them how to add small pieces of mirror to make them twinkle. "Look what happens when we do this," Maya called out. She had arranged several lanterns in a circle. When the light hit them just right, it made patterns that moved across the ground like dancing shadows. Jin watched all of this with growing excitement. "We're not just making a Christmas display anymore," he told Yuna. "We're making art that changes with the sun and wind. It's alive in a way the quantum lights never were." Late in the afternoon, they had their first test. Everyone gathered in the street to watch as the setting sun hit the display. Light bounced from mirror to mirror, creating patterns that moved across the lanterns. The painted patterns seemed to come alive, telling their mixed stories of Christmas and Korean tradition. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," Mrs. Chen said, wiping tears from her eyes. "It makes me think of home, but it also feels new and American at the same time." As darkness fell, they turned on the regular Christmas lights they had strung between the lanterns. The effect was magical. The mirrors now caught and reflected these lights, making them seem to multiply and dance. The painted lanterns glowed from within, casting colorful shadows that moved in the winter wind. "Better than quantum lights," Marcus said proudly, "because we all made it together." They worked late into the night, making small adjustments. Every time they moved a mirror or repositioned a lantern, they discovered new patterns and effects. The display seemed to have endless possibilities. "Tomorrow we'll see how it looks in full daylight," Jin said as they finally went inside. "Then we can make the final adjustments before the judging." That night, the Park family sat in their living room, tired but happy. Outside, their new display glowed softly in the moonlight. It wasn't what they had originally planned. It wasn't full of high-tech wonders and quantum effects. But it was something more special. It was the work of many hands and hearts coming together. "Someone tried to hurt us by destroying our display," Yuna said, looking at her family. "But look what happened instead. They made us create something even more beautiful." Maya yawned and leaned against her mother. "And we did it without any complicated technology. Just simple things like paper and light and mirrors." "And people," Marcus added. "Don't forget all the people who helped." Jin looked out the window at their glowing yard. Tomorrow would be their last day to work on the display before the judging. But he wasn't worried anymore. They had already won something more important than any contest. They had shown their community the real meaning of Christmas. People coming together to create something beautiful, even when others try to tear it down. The family went to bed that night feeling proud and grateful. Their Christmas display had changed in ways they never expected, but the change had made it better. Sometimes they realized the best innovations come not from complicated technology, but from simple things used in new ways, especially when those simple things include friendship, creativity, and love. The morning of the judging day arrived with perfect winter weather. The sky was clear and blue, which meant their light and mirror display would work exactly as planned. Jin stood in the yard early that morning, watching the sunrise and create the first light patterns of the day. The judges would come at 5 o'clock that evening. This gave the Park family and their friends one last day to make everything perfect. People started arriving right after breakfast, bringing more supplies and food for everyone who was helping. "The morning light sequence is working perfectly," Maya said, taking pictures with her tablet. She had been documenting how the display changed throughout the day. Wait until the judges see how the patterns move as the sun changes position. Marcus worked with his team of artists to touch up the painted lanterns. They had discovered that sunlight revealed tiny details in the paintings that weren't visible at night. Some lanterns told the story of Santa's journey around the world. Others showed Korean holiday celebrations. When the light hit them just right, the two stories seemed to blend together into one. Like our family, Marcus said proudly. Two different stories becoming one beautiful thing. Yuna and Mrs. Chen organized groups to check every lantern and mirror. They had to make sure everything was secure and positioned correctly. The winter wind had moved some things during the night, and each piece needed to be exactly right for the light patterns to work. Remember, Yuna told the helpers, even moving a mirror one tiny bit can change the whole pattern. We need everything to be perfect when the judges come. Throughout the morning, more news crews arrived to film their display. The story of the Sabotage and how the community came together to help had spread far beyond their town. Reporters interviewed everyone who was helping, asking how the parks had turned such a bad thing into something so beautiful. It's simple, really, Jin told one reporter. When someone tried to destroy our display, they thought they were just attacking our decorations. But what makes something special isn't the fancy technology or expensive equipment. It's the heart and creativity you put into it. That's something no one can destroy. Around lunchtime, Officer Kim arrived with important news. The police had found proof that Mr. Hansen had damaged their display. Security cameras from a neighbor's house had recorded him sneaking into their yard that night. He had also left electronic traces when he hacked their computer system. We're prepared to press charges, Officer Kim told the parks. Mr. Hansen has agreed to confess and pay for all the damage. He wants to apologize in person if you're willing to hear him out. The Park family talked it over and decided to listen to what Mr. Hansen had to say. He came to their house looking very different from his usual confident self. His wife came with him, both of them seeming embarrassed and ashamed. I did something terrible, Mr. Hansen admitted, his voice shaking. I was jealous of your displays getting better every year. When I heard about the contest, I worried that you would win. I let that worry turn into anger, and the anger made me do something unforgivable. Mrs. Hansen spoke up too. We've lived next door to you for 15 years, but we never really tried to know you. We let our prejudices blind us to what wonderful neighbors you are. We're so sorry. Jin and Yuna listened carefully to their apology. Maya and Marcus stood with their parents, watching their neighbors finally tell the truth. What you did was very wrong, Jin said firmly. But we believe in forgiveness, especially at Christmas time. We would rather move forward as friends than look backward as enemies. Yuna had an idea. Why don't you help us finish setting up for the judging? Then you'll be part of making something beautiful instead of destroying it. The Hansens looked surprised at this offer, but they accepted gratefully. Soon, Mr. Hansen was helping to adjust mirrors while Mrs. Hansen learned how to paint Korean patterns on lanterns. Their own children, who had never been allowed to play with Maya and Marcus, joined the other kids in making paper decorations. As afternoon approached, the display looked more magical with each passing hour. The shifting sunlight created new patterns every few minutes. The painted lanterns glowed with warm colors. The mirrors caught and multiplied every bit of light, making the whole yard sparkle and shine. People brought chairs and blankets, setting up places to watch the judging. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when the contest judges arrived. The whole street felt like it was having a winter party. At exactly 5 o'clock, the judge's car pulled up. There were 3 judges, the mayor, an art teacher from the local college, and a famous decorator who had written books about Christmas displays. They walked slowly around the park's yard, taking notes and asking questions. Jin and Yuna explained how the display worked, showing how they used simple scientific principles to create complex beauty. Marcus and Maya demonstrated how the patterns changed as the sun set and the Christmas lights came on. The judges watched everything with great interest. In all my years of judging Christmas displays, the famous decorator said, I've never seen anything like this. You've created something entirely new while honoring old traditions. The art teacher was especially impressed by Marcus's paintings. These lanterns belong in a museum, she said. They tell a story of cultures coming together in the most beautiful way. The mayor spoke last. When I heard about the sabotage, I thought you might give up. Instead, you showed us all what community really means. This display isn't just about Christmas lights anymore. It's about people coming together to create something wonderful. After inspecting everything, the judges went to their car to make their decision. They would visit all the other displays in the contest before announcing the winner the next day. Everyone in the park's yard waited nervously. Mr. Hanson stepped forward. Whatever the judges decide, I want you to know that you've already won something more important. You've taught all of us about forgiveness and creativity. You showed us that different traditions can come together to make something more beautiful than we imagined. As darkness fell, their display glowed more brightly than ever. The lanterns cast warm light in all directions. The mirrors created patterns that looked like dancing stars. The painted stories seemed to come alive in the gentle winter night. The crowd stayed late into the evening, drinking hot chocolate and sharing stories. Children played among the lanterns while their parents talked and laughed together. The whole neighborhood felt different somehow, warmer and more welcoming than before. The next morning, the mayor called with the news they had all been waiting for. The Park family had won first place in the contest, but they had won something else too. A special award created just for them, called the Community Spirit Award. Your display shows us that true beauty comes from people working together, the mayor said. You've given our town a wonderful Christmas gift, the gift of unity and understanding. The parks celebrated their victory with everyone who had helped them. They served Korean and American food, played Christmas carols and Korean holiday songs, and watched children play with the light patterns. Even the Hansons joined the celebration, now as friends instead of just neighbors. That evening, as the family stood in their yard looking at their creation, Maya said something very wise. We thought we lost everything when they broke our quantum lights, but we ended up gaining something better. We gained a whole community of friends. Jin put his arm around his daughter. That's the real Christmas miracle, he said. Not the lights or the contest win, but the way people came together to help us. That's more beautiful than any quantum light show could ever be. As the winter stars came out above their glowing yard, the Park family knew they had created more than just a Christmas display. They had helped build a stronger community, one where different cultures and traditions could come together to make something beautiful. And that was the greatest victory of all.